This has become
Terry?
a habit of mine. When do you guys have a pen in your drawer? There's one. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Yes, Director Strange.
Here.
Director Radaman.
Here.
President Davidson.
Here.
Director Thomas.
I'm here.
And Director Anderson.
Okay, second item on the agenda is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. Public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Is there any public comment today?
Hi. This isn't my purse, by the way. This I was using last year when we had the drought. And whenever I would fill my, shower waiting for hot water, I put all the water in here. And then I take it out to the garden, which was really cool. So now I'm finding out that there is an agricultural person in Copperopolis that has been using a residential water source on Little John, and it's excessive what he's been taking as far as water is concerned. And here last year we were all being good and making sure that we were following, what we needed to follow as far as our cutting back and being good Californians. So this gentleman is probably paying about $20 a month for using this key at Little John. And I know that he's taken acre feet of water, maybe 3, 5, something in that neighborhood. I would like to see him pay for the water, whether he's taken to small claims court, which I've suggested, whether you bill him or whether you take him to a big court. But it's just a matter of principle because, we're paying a lot for our water. There's a lot of people in Copperopolis that are really struggling. So I would like to have the board make kind of a statement that this won't be tolerated. And if you do something like this, you need to pay for what you're taking. So that's my point. It's not fair that he should maybe not be prosecuted at all. So that's what I'm asking. Thank you for your time.
Is it one of the fill station out there? Is that where you made a comment
Yes.
of $20 a month?
Yes.
Or
And-
$20 for a key,
Yeah,
period?
he- And by the way, I understand he's taking water now on Reed's Turnpike several times a day. That's what I mean. It's just an ad note. Thank you.
Thanks.
Terry, I have observed this same fellow. In fact, I was at the water treatment plant one day recently, and there was a sheriff's deputy there that took his statement. The guy that's actually driving the vehicle is just a hired person who's making up to 5 trips a day with a 500-gallon tank and going over and filling the on-site tanks that they use for irrigation of their illegal growth. So the key has been taken away from him. Dave may want to make some comments on this. The suggestion has been made that we change the policy so that when somebody does this in the future, there is a financial penalty. Currently, there is not. And I'm kind of in agreement with Dave that I don't know. As much as I'd like to see the book thrown at somebody like this, it's kind of a I don't know, questionable use of our resources to go after him under the present circumstances, where there's nothing to be gained by it except she said, maybe make an example of him, but I don't know. We need to talk about it.
Well, I the intent of that, the tank fill are for residential folks that their wells went dry and they're really in need of water. It's a
Exactly.
short-term
Right.
solution.
wanna make a
Listen, we
suggestion.
can't have a long
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
about this,
We-
so if it's something we need to put on the agenda, then that's what we need to do.
And, Mr. President, I would just ask, that we'll come back with that updated policy to address this issue. I just let you know, we have done everything that we have the ability to do to stop this and to refer it to law enforcement. So we have not been ignoring it.
Well, I've been contacted about this issue as well. and
We
it's a
can't have,
good-
we can't keep talking about it. It's not on the agenda.
No, get it on the agenda and
Well-
have a talk about policy going forward.
Can we talk about it, or we can't take action about it?
We can't talk about
We're
it.
not supposed to form any opinion and policy. I mean, we'll put it on the
Yeah,
agenda.
we'll come
It's-
back
Yeah,
with
let's
the
get it on
policy.
the agenda. Cool. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to the consent agenda. The following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed for later discussion. 3A, review of board monthly timesheets. 3B, approved ratified claim summary 545. 3C, approved request of credit adjustment for account 009506-000. And 3D, approve the Region 3 election battle for the 2018-19 term of Association of California Water Agencies.
Director Chair, I'd like to pull 3C.
Okay? Can we get a motion for 3A, 3B, and 3D?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3C, Terry.
The question I have on that, I'd like more information, and hopefully Stacy probably has that. Stacy, if you could come and kind of explain the cause of the leak, what happened, how long the water leak took place, things like that, it would be much appreciated for my better understanding.
The leak, it was down in their lower part of their facility. They didn't give me exact location. Our policy doesn't require that, but when we look at the usage from the previous years, we compare it to the time period that they're requesting. It was very significantly higher during that time. They repaired the leak, and then their usage has gone down. So that's how we determine that it's most likely a leak. They found a leak on their property, and then they applied for the application of the leak adjustment policy.
Okay, so my question is one of, they have staff, this is over at the campground on Army Corps, or somehow it's related with the Army Corps. They have staff every day that drive around, and I would assume that they would have the opportunity to recognize a leak and take prompt action to fix it. So,
Actually, we were in conversations with them quite a bit, and they could not find the leak.
is there any idea of when it was first noticed versus when it was repaired? I guess, or when it was suspected to be a leak and when it was repaired? I'm a little concerned that, if this went on for months and months and months, and finally they had time and staff to go fix it, I'm less likely to support an action of $1,600 forgiveness. This is an agency that really hits us hard with all of our financial requirements that we have there. $1,600 is a lot of money, and we're not talking about, at least in my opinion, a resident that's really struggling to get by, and because the idea of no fault of their own is how it's worded here. This leak is no fault of their own. Then tell me why it's not your fault, or
I know,
So
we
anyway.
had field staff out there who helped them try to identify, even our field staff couldn't help them identify. Once the winter weather subsided, they were able to find the leak, is what I was told.
So there's a chance that it may have gone on for months and months and months and was finally repaired.
Might have had to wait until it dried up so they could find the leak. I mean,
Right.
That's why I say I'd like more information on
Right.
that
We
before I
have-
take action.
We do have it, in fact, we do have another leak adjustment out for another customer with the same situation.
We got to make sure and be consistent on this, whether it's a governmental agency that we're serving water to, or whether it's a residential customer in a low-income area. We got to make sure that our policies don't differentiate. We got to be consistent.
And I just echo that, and that I think that, you know, that's part of the verification that we do to make sure that this is something, I mean, if they had found out, it sounds like they were in a situation where they couldn't have known about it because of the fact that the ground was wet, and we confirmed that, and, but you're exactly right. If we are approached by any customer who's trying to get relief under this when they didn't, you know, they didn't exercise, you know, the responsibilities they had as a property owner to address it when they found out about it, then that's why we have discretion under the policy. It's really about us having a means to provide some means of relief when our customers, you know, and particularly customers who've timely made payment over the, you know, course of history, like this customer has, and they're in a situation like this. It gives us the opportunity to provide better customer service. And I know it's a lot more compelling when it's an individual and not a, you know, federal agency, but it's a situation where we do have to be consistent in how we apply this, and you know, we don't want to act arbitrarily, and I think we followed the same protocol we would have with an individual homeowner and found that it was merited, and that's why we brought this forward today.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think with the residents, though, if it's, you know, they start seeing $1,000 water bill, they're gonna act and get on it and fix it right away. And I'm not so sure that happened in this case. That's why.
The bill in this case was significantly higher, and then that's why the credit is so much higher. Because of their usage had gone up because they had found the leak, because they found the leak. We only use it for one billing period, so there may have been other billing periods where it was higher, because I don't know exactly when they found the leak versus when we read versus when we billed. So it is only one billing period that the credit is applied to. It only gets applied once every 5 years. If they have a leak again, it's all on them.
Okay, all right, thank you. Based upon that, then, I'll make a motion that we accept 3C.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll go to new business 4A, discussion action regarding approval of water wastewater service facilities agreement for La Cobra Mine, Unit 2, Copper Cove.
Good morning, board members. This is a non-standard agreement in the sense that one section of the standard contract was taken out because the people doing this, Miramont Homes, are not going to want to do an assessment district. Thank you. And of course, the preamble, which kind of goes through a lot more information than you want to know about where this development started and stopped and so forth. We're bringing it to you because our policies require that. If I can figure out. Joel, I hit this. Oh, there we go. Okay. I apologize. I have to relearn this every time I come up here. I don't come up here often enough to do that. This is the subdivision. It's south of La Cobra Mine Unit 1, which was actually Black Creek. It's about a third of the way down Copper Cove Drive from O'Byrne's Ferry towards Little John. That's where the subdivision is. It's 38 units. At one point, wastewater was put in. It has been in use. A certain section of it, lift station 21, is actually part of this subdivision. So, as you know, that's been in use for quite some time. Final easement, access easement, and all that are dependent upon the finalization of this subdivision. So it's actually a good thing that they're doing it for us. We've attached the agreements. If you have any question about that, I'm happy to answer them. This is really just a subdivision that got to a certain point, and when the economic downturn hit with a vengeance. It stopped. They were 99% done and just in the final, and that's what we're doing right now. Are there any questions?
So they, as it mentioned here, they reverted the acreage into a single lot?
The county did that. There's a certain process through which the county goes when things are not finalized with a temporary subdivision map, a TSTM.
Okay.
That's why there are two numbers on that.
And so when we have a change of ownership and then the intent to revise a previous agreement, this is a typical way of how we handle that then, rather than requiring the new owners to go back and start the process kind of over again or update?
Right, in particular, because we had construction-approved plans, everything was in the ground, it was even mostly inspected, about 85% inspected. If you'll recall, units 4A and 5 in Forest Meadows, we had the same situation. And there are still one or two subdivisions like this out there, where the lion's share, if not all of the infrastructure was put in, but the project itself was not finalized, which is what we're trying to do here. So they can build on it and we can sell connections to them.
So there, the infrastructure is already there.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't require any additional assessment as per existing conditions from our staff in time to evaluate to say, yes, we can move forward with it.
We'll do final inspections on it to make sure that everything is okay, and if it's not, we'll bring it up to current code.
Okay.
We'll TV the sewer lines, et cetera, et cetera. That's essentially all we're going to do to the subdivision. It was even graded. I think they've gotten to a point where everything was done in that nature. They hadn't paved it or anything, but when we were working on this lower cross country, lift station 21, when we were working on that and finalizing that, I remember seeing all the pipes coming out of each of these individual lots and wondering when that would finally get done. Now that was 8 or 9 years ago, so it's finally getting done.
Okay. So something that's 12 years old, shut down basically in 2005, now bringing it back in 2017. All the materials and everything's pretty much the same as it was 12 years ago.
It's been buried.
Yes.
Are you asking for
I'm
design
not
standards to
sure.
change?
I want to make sure I understand the question.
Well, I guess where I'm coming from, and it's probably already been evaluated, I just want to make sure that there's no additional time and effort by our staff to take a system that was approved back in 2005 or was used in 2005, bringing it up to today's standards, and if there's any upfront evaluation from our staff that's going to require time and effort and that we would need to get reimbursed for.
When we have a
at this
water
time.
and wastewater facilities agreement signed with Miramont, the current installations for the individual lots, for the 38 individual lots, is going to be re-inspected and reapproved.
Okay.
The lift station 21, I wish I had something to point with. The top line of that subdivision is actually also an easement, and a line comes down from the businesses and the homes at the intersection of O'Byrne's Ferry and Copper Cove. And that's been in use all this time. That was a different line. It was an off-site line that was done, accepted and everything back in 2007, whenever all this was done. That the original contract was done in 2005. Things, it takes a little while for things to be put in.
Right.
So your question is well taken, but yes, we are going to inspect, and yes, they are going to pay for that.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's why it's so important we've got this broad cost recovery provision in the agreement under Section 4 is
Exactly.
very important. And I do very much appreciate the fact that, Director Strange, what you're, that really does go to an expense of the district, and are we recovering our costs for that? And that's something not only in this aspect, but across the board we're looking at right now to make sure that we are charging, adequate fees and cost recovery is happening.
Thank you.
And then I had a question.
Yes, Bertha.
On page 9, it says that if the owner does not submit and district does not release for construction the improvement plan within 2 years. Can you
The last,
elaborate on that one?
last paragraph on
Yeah.
page 9.
Yeah, that's why the last one is out of date. We're basically starting a new one.
Right, no, that's not what I understand. So they will have 2 years.
Right, to do something that's already been done, for all practical purposes. All that is left for us to do, pretty much, is inspect it. Everything else was done. We actually have the inspection reports from back then. We actually still have the same inspector. Jared inspected it, so,
This is a standard facilities agreement.
yes, sir.
So, I mean, this is the typical that we do every single time.
If I could give a little background on this, some of these things keep coming back and back, but when I was on the Board of Supervisors, the county attorney convinced 4 supervisors that this was necessary for this to revert to a single, like they took it back all the way to like the equivalent of resource production. Even though all the grading was in, every telephone service was into the lots. I mean, I think that the lots may have been certified, but it was
Yeah,
bank.
by the county, I believe you're right.
It was bank-owned, and I argued until I got red in the face that this is really a ridiculous thing. All this is gonna do is cost somebody tons of money to bring it back and reinstate it. But the bank didn't object, and so, I don't know, it got reverted back to they could have put a fence around it and started grazing cattle on it, I guess, but they wouldn't eat very much grass on a graded lot. But it was one of the most ridiculous things that I saw happen.
Well, it's good to see some action going again.
Yeah.
That's
I'm very
what I'm
pleased.
trying to do here.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
and they are building houses very aggressively in phase 1. and-
Yes, they are.
Yeah. So, anyway, if there's any other discussion.
Any other questions?
Is there someone here representing that? Would you like to speak?
It's not required.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Built our first homes, made our first connections in the early 80s and for CCWD. And it's, even though a large out of the area investment group did all the heavy lifting of the infrastructure and did a good job of it, otherwise we would not have taken on this hurdle. We do appreciate the fact that locally we're able to bring this to completion and get some service connections and move in some families in this area that could use the extra economic activities. Thank you.
What's your
very much
name?
for your approval. My name is Mike Lemke, apologize, with Marymount Homes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to move for acceptance of 4A, discussion on the wastewater service facilities for La Cobra Mena, Unit 2 in Copper Cove.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other board discussion? Any public comment? Please call the roll.
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Adams?
Yes?
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
And President Davidson?
Yes. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we will go now to 4B, to receive and adopt the 2017 water and sewer financial plans. Mr. Meyer. You need Rob to come up help you there?
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. The item before you today is actually to not only receive and possibly provide some final comments, but to adopt the financial plan that was included in the staff report. As you remember, going back to when we hired HDR, we talked about a two-phase process. Phase 1, which is the financial analysis which is what we're wrapping up today, and Phase 2 would not proceed until your board authorized them, which would be the cost of service and the rate design portion of their agreement. So we're looking at coming to the end of Phase 1, and that's where what I'd like for your board to do today is to adopt the plan and allow us to go to the next step. This plan has been brought before the Finance Committee. It's been brought before your board, so there's been several iterations. So I won't go through a lot of the detail on this. We did, in conjunction with HDR, they prepared a financial plan, or what in their terms is a revenue requirement analysis for both the water and sewer operating and capital CIP programs. Today, I'd like your board to adopt, the recommendation is your board adopt it and then provide us with direction on addressing those funding gaps that have been identified in previous presentations, both on the water and sewer side. Excuse me. Here's a map of the process of where we are and what we've embarked upon. First off is kind of looking at the big picture, determining the funding needs and the funding gaps. That's what this financial analysis is doing. Today, we're in step 2, where your board receives the report and then adopts the report, and then we go down here into step 3 and step 4. Again, what we're looking at is, as I've identified, we have funding gaps in both the water and sewer side. That takes us down into step 3, which staff will do and bring back to your board. The goal and objective of all this work is to develop the financial plans. We did this by looking at both the capital needs and the operational needs and splitting them up in between water and sewer. You had a board workshop on June 8th. When we looked at that, we said, you know what, there's still some more work to do. We went back and looked at how we identified all these different costs to make sure it's in line with our goals and objectives. There's the fiscal year 16-17 through 19-20 were based on budgeted. 2019 and beyond were used on annual inflationary factors that HDR has been using for a number of agencies. Some of the changes we made post June 8th was we went back and said, okay, our CIP program was a little bit aggressive, so we started stretching out some of the programs and projects a little bit to make sure we minimize the need to borrow money. We identified some needs for money borrowing in the sewer side because we have such important needs coming up, especially in the Copper Cove area. We also looked back on the operating because a lot of the funding gap was associated with the sewer plan. And we went back to some of the fundamental assumptions we've used for the last 10 years in how we allocate our costs between water and sewer, particularly in the utilities department and staffing costs, salaries and benefits. I worked with utilities, Teresa and Jesse. We went back and revisited how much time each individual employee spends on the water side and the sewer side. What we call Fund 300 is water, Fund 500 is sewer. So we revisited those assumptions and we actually changed how we allocate salaries and benefits to what was once 57% water, 43 sewer, to now 64% water, 36 sewer. That places less burden on the sewer side, and it better aligns ourselves with reality. We also looked at how we allocate those costs that are not previously charged to 300 and 500. When we have purchase orders, they have to write down a fund number and an account number so that we know that it's 300 or 500. There's a group of costs that do not follow that process because they're general costs. We updated the allocations using that 64-38%. Again, tends to place a little less burden on the sewer side and more on the water, and it's more appropriate. It accurately reflects how we allocate our costs. We brought this back to your Finance Committee on the July 18th. Tom Gould of HDR was here on the 26th, presented this plan to you. There really hasn't been any change since then. We did identify those gaps And as I've said all along, it's incumbent upon us as staff to come up with a plan on how to reduce that funding gap, whether it's reductions in costs, whether it's revenue enhancements, like on the water side, we need people to use more water. You know, that's the big thing. We've all said that the drought in the state has driven down our revenues, and we need to bring them back to a level that really helps fund our operations. And we're looking at some of the rate transition plan. All that will be coming up to you in the end of this month and also in September as we, the staff, come forward with this 5-year plan. This is hard to see, that's why I printed it up for you in your handout there. We started first with the funding plan for water capital. And this is a plan that not only shows you where our revenues are coming from, which is our R&R revenues is a majority of our funding for this. It also shows you that we are assuming no increase in R&R rates. We know that we have a funding source that's limited, but we can live within those means on both the water and sewer side. So the revenues we get plus the existing fund balance is what we're going to be working with within this 5-year time frame. And this is all based on the 5-year CIP that your board adopted back in March, and we update every year, and the budget that Charles puts forward. And just to let you know, we always want to make sure that that budget reflects what our needs are, and it could change based on emergencies and such. We do have what's called transfers to operations in this area line right there. That's basically, the most of it is our debt service obligation for the R&R loans and other loans, the USDA and such. We budget for those debt service in the operating budget, so that's why you see that transfer in. The capital outlay is the budget we have for the CIP projects. Bottom line, if you look down here, we start out with a healthy balance at the end of 17-18 of 10.7 million, but over time, that goes down to 1.3 million. We're spending more than we actually bring in on an annual basis, but we're using that fund balance, that savings that we've had over the last couple of years, which includes the R&R loans, to be able to fund all these projects over the 5 years. So on the water side, we're okay. And that is unless emergency comes up, and I want to address that in just a moment.
The other thing I want to just add here, I know we have on grant funding, that line item, there's zeros for fiscal years 2019-20 through 22-23. We certainly expect that we're going to have grant funds in those years. It's just that we need to be conservative in the estimate here and what we show, because obviously we haven't applied for those grants. We don't even know what the solicitation are going to look like, but that's obviously going to be part of our continuing strategy in trying to maximize the availability of other funds and leveraging that to get work done and further, get our projects done and better utilize the funds that we have on hand.
It gives us a chance, the R&R funds give us a chance to leverage into larger projects, leverage the grants into larger projects. Like the ones you see in here, the 2.8 million and the 1 million. That's Jenny Lynn pretreatment plant, which we got authorization to move forward, and I believe we're going to start in the spring. We got authorization and approval of the plans. Is that correct, Dave?
I'm sorry, Jeff, I was about to interject on something else, and I missed the...
Jenny Lynn, water pretreatment plant. The CalEMA has given us the go-ahead to move forward on that project, but not until next spring. So that's how we utilize and leverage local funds, 75-25%, so that we can get a bigger project, which we wouldn't otherwise do if we didn't have the grant funds.
I was going to interject that at our next meeting, we're going to bring to the board an update on our grants program. And as part of that, we're really getting very organized in how we pursue grants and how we vet them and all of that. And that's with Joel's new duties, and he's going to be giving an update to the board on that. As part of that, we're going to actually be presenting a framework to the board. We're going to give you the approach that we're working on right now, and ultimately we'll come back and ask the board to to bless that so that we all, you know, and we all know exactly how we pursue grants and our methodology for vetting them and those that we put our resources into. But I can just want to assure you, I think that, you know, I'd love to see a asterisk on that 0 that, you know, that's only because we can't say with any degree of certainty because the bonds may not even been issued yet, or the laws that, you know, at the state level to even authorize the bonds may not have been adopted yet, but we certainly expect we're going to have grant funding in those other years.
It would be a benefit to me to be able to lay out some of Charles' project plans, or, you know, the improvement or other activities from his agency or his staff, just to see how they overlay as far as the funding plus the projects identified for that year and things like that. But
Certainly. So what you're asking for is the detail behind the summary numbers, and we do have that.
That's our adopted capital improvement plan, right?
It is, and it's
Yeah.
also based on the budget that your board adopted for 17-18, but we do have that information.
Okay, excuse me, I have a question. Before we go on to more of the big picture, I'm looking back and, you know, I was reading and I was looking at some of the conclusions and observations from HDR. And so what they said in there is not what you're saying here, okay? Because unless there's an emergency, we don't have to do anything as far as our rates are concerned.
Are you talking about R&R or your operating rates?
Well, this is page number 12.
Of the
And we're
report?
talking, yeah,
Okay,
and it says to eliminate these funding deficiencies.
that's in the operating side.
Uh-huh.
This is the capital side. I'll get to the operating
Oh,
side
okay.
next.
But it's really important, again, we want to be clear, the R&R funds are essential for us to get these projects done. Every day I'm more and more convinced of how important these projects are, because if we don't do these projects, as we know, these are our most in need infrastructure, our oldest stuff, our things that's failing, things that are failing or will fail, that are the operational challenges for us now and into the future. And on the operating side, one of the best things we can do is to get ahead of the challenges. I saw that down at Jenny Lynn yesterday, putting in pressure reducing stations to try to relieve some of the pressure in our older distribution system is critical to making sure that we try to limit the number of breaks. All of that kind of stuff is what's in here, and the bottom line is we're going to work with the funds that we have. We're not going to even be considering or proposing any changes to rates associated with R&R. We'll live within the amount that's already there, and including what was already reduced by the board. And but we certainly, this is again a critically important part of our ability to manage these assets. So I think that's an important part of this report. It really did confirm that,
We're still not considering hiring any new field guys? Which, I'm just curious, because I'm starting to hear a lot of noise about, the leak repairs and the delays and the prioritization, and I understand it, but the public is getting a little anxious about that, when they see a leak out there for, 30, 40 days, that they get concerned about it, and whether or not they're damaging the roads and that sort of thing, but, are we adequately staffed in the field? And are we going to address that?
I would, President Davidson, I would love to add positions in the field to, beyond, for example, the distribution crew down there. We've got 3 people. Yesterday they did 5 brake repairs in the morning. They had another 28 already logged that Randy was, trying to figure out how we would and when he would get those done. In addition, he had a large stack of work orders on all the other things that distribution has to do to provide customer service, reading meters, rereads, things like that, as we need to be out there and serve the public. So no, I very much agree with you that that would be phenomenal if we could do it. The challenge is we've got to try to make this work within a very constrained budget with real gaps here. And I think, I think the way we have to do it is simply try to be as efficient as we possibly can with the people that we do have, and really looking at, what the tasks people are doing now, how we have our teams organized. Is there any other opportunity to gain access to other staff to help when we need to, really get on these projects, and there's a real press to get this work done. So I think all of that stuff has got to be part of what we look at, and as well, as we have people, 50% of our employees eligible for retirement in the next 5 years, how do we, we don't just fill the exact same position that we've always had. We have to really look at that and determine what is the best fit for us, and we may simply need to reallocate some of those resources towards things like what you're talking about. But I'm very cognizant of that. I think what I came away from yesterday being down there was, I want to look at every aspect of how we deal with the challenge of breaks in our lines down there, because it touches people throughout. I mean, not just those guys. It touches people, across this agency, and customer service and repeated calls, and those get, they deal with them. Then they go to operations management, then they deal with it, and then distribution staff are dealing with it as well. I want to look at all aspects of that, and how do we best utilize the resources, staffing resources we have across the agency to deal with that. There may be certain things we need to say, distribution crew, you guys, that's no longer, you don't have to deal with that aspect of this. Let's let other people in the organization do it, so you don't have to spend extra time on that. And then as well, how do we best use our R&R funds? What can we, just like the Bluebell line, let's take out the stuff that's the real problem area. We really have to identify the stuff where you're coming back and repairing this stuff over and over and over again, and you're making repairs in a section that already has, patches all over that line. Let's get rid of that sorry line. Let's do the infrastructure replacement through the R&R, so that we relieve some of that burden on the crew down there. And so all that's front and center, and that's what we're going to work on immediately.
All right.
Director Underhill, I jumped ahead, but what I just wanted to remind everyone in the room here today is that, remember, our rates are broken down into two components.
Right.
Operations and R&R. The references that HDR made in the summary are to the operating side. Let me go back. So I just wanted to point out one more thing here, is that even though we have adequate funds in our reserves and we have revenues coming in, we will be looking for grant opportunities. As it stands now, for what we know we actually have, in years 2019-20 and year 2021-22, our reserve levels dropped down around $500,000 or less. That's something we had talked about at the last meeting. There's looking at possibly setting a minimum threshold in there to have funds available for emergencies or some things that come up, that we may have a grant funding opportunity, that we have a real large project that we have to do, just so we have reserves available for that process. Now, the sewer side is not as rosy. That's where a lot of our challenges are in this particular process. A lot of that has to do with the fact that sewer projects are numerous and very expensive, and we just don't have the revenue base that we have had in the other programs, especially the water R&R. And again, we're assuming no rate increase on the R&R. We start out with about let me go down to the end of 2016-17, about $3 million in the bank. But we also have significant spending over that time frame, all these capital outlays, and basically flat revenues coming in. With the projects that we have on the plate, one of those that you'll approve today, that's before you, another ones that we're looking at, Pond 6 expansion and some of the other issues. We are most likely going to be going out and looking for some more borrowing to help fill the gap. The unfortunate thing about grants in the Copper Cove area, based on the income level down there, we really don't qualify for a number of these low-income grants or disadvantaged community grants. So it's basically on our dime. Again, we're looking at possibly the need to set some minimum funding thresholds on the reserve amounts, because as you can see, they are quite low. It does rebound in 2023, but we're looking at other areas that need funding as well besides copper. Yes, Director Adams.
Remind me again what the other funding is, the line towards the bottom, the third line up?
Yes, That is, some of that is, that's a combination of two things. One is expansion funds, because some of these projects do require funding from expansion funds. They're either a combination of projects that not only rehab, but expand the capacity of our systems. It's also some assessment district from Wallace Community Service District, the ones we brought in, and we're going to be, those lots have a 10-year assessment on them, and as we accumulate the funding, we do projects to upgrade their systems, and that's on the schedule.
And then back on the slide right before this on the water, starting in 2020, there was some other funding.
That also is some funding for some expansion funds and
Okay.
Wallace.
All right, thanks.
Yes.
So the big jump in the 1920 other funding from the previous year of 550,000 to 2.1 million is due to what?
That is the expansion of an existing system that's also going to be rehabbed as well. I believe that is the Pond 6 process that we're looking at, Pond 6 expansion. And that's where, if you can see too, that when we look at it, we're going to have to, down under borrowing, add $1 million. Pond 6 right now is a $5 million project. And it's being redefined. Charles can go into a little bit more if you'd like, but we're meeting with the regulators because of the wet winter issues that we had with that. They're redefining how the scope of that project to meet what the state requirement is on how to address it, and it may reach beyond just expansion. It may touch all that portion of the wastewater treatment plant in Copper Cove and storage. So that project may expand a little bit more beyond the scope and cost more than $5 million, then we'll have to borrow more than $1 million.
Well,
But
Jeff,
some of that is related to expansion of the system to allow for more connections. That portion of the project related to expansion can be charged to the expansion fund.
If there are customers to tap into that.
We have money in that expansion fund already that's been collections of funds over the years, and those capacity fees can only be used for expanding. So doing this project will allow more connections in the future, trying to get ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Jeff, just that borrowing, the 1 million estimate, that is also predicated on the receipt of grant funds. And I know, as you said, although we may not get grant funds directly within certain areas because of the income level of those communities, like in Copper, because of the fact that we are one district and our assets and liabilities and everything are treated as such, if we did, because of the operational budgeting issues, lost access to grant funds that we are contemplating, then that does affect the entire equation and potentially puts other projects at risk on here or further depletes the ongoing financial resources that we have under R&R.
That's true, and thank you for reminding me of that, because that grant funding, the 4.5 combined, that's for the West Point Wilseyville project. That's what's scheduled under that line of grant funding. And it's beyond it, from what Charles has been letting us know, is it's moving from a nice-to-have project to probably a need, because our permit's coming up for renewal, and it looks like the state's going to require us to move forward. So that's a big component of this. Now, West Point Wilseyville is a disadvantaged community, so we can leverage grants to be able to do these projects. Any more questions on the sewer capital side? Just to summarize the findings of the capital funding plans, we're not going to need, at this point, it appears we have enough cash and rate revenue to cover all our projects, water projects over the next 5 years. Sewer, we're going to need to borrow, at this point, what we're looking at is at least $1 million for the Pond 6 expansion, but that could change based on regulatory requirements. And I think the key here is what Dave talked about, and I think we're all aware of it, is the R&R revenues are not only critical to long-term sustainability of our facilities, but in time will help lower our O&M costs. And that's what we have to do as part of this funding gap process. We have to lower our operating funds, and a lot of that has to do with replacing our infrastructure. The breaks, a lot of times the breaks don't occur between the regular working hours, after hours, weekends, so that causes us overtime and inconveniences and work that gets pushed aside. And another point Dave made, and this is important, because those rates need, our program, capital program needs adequate debt coverage to meet our existing debt, the BBVA, the UMQA loans, the USDA loans. So those loan and bond covenants require us to meet certain debt coverage ratios, and it also allows us to qualify for grants and low-cost loans. And that grant right there is underlined for West Point, Wellesleyville at this point. And finally, we do need to address the topic of minimum reserve levels in both these funds. What is an appropriate level that we want to have in the R&R funds?
And you know, one of the really important reasons for that is because, you know, these plans obviously don't assume the emergency situations that will arise that we can't anticipate right now. We can't anticipate there will be emergencies. We know that from our experience over the last several years, and we want to be in a position to where we don't have to, you know, go to borrowing or you know, I mean, essentially that would be our only option, I think. I mean, there's no, you know, we really would have no other option if we don't have access to an adequate reserve within R&R, within remaining funds on hand. We would be left to go and try to borrow, and you know, again, that has long-term consequences with, you know, that would affect us for years to come.
Yeah. And just a reminder, this is a 5-year plan we're looking at. Obviously, there's more projects beyond the 5 years, but this is the window we're looking in this particular financial plan. So we have projects on both water and sewer side. Any questions on the capital funding side, the CIPs? Now we're going to move on to the operating side. This is where our daily expenses are recorded: salaries, benefits, services and supplies, contracts, debt service, and all. And when you look at this area right here under total revenue, I guess the most telling thing here is you only see small incremental increases in our total revenue on the water side. That's because all we're doing is looking at maybe new connections. It could possibly change if people open up their spigots and use more, but we don't know that for sure. And unfortunately, at this time, our billing process lags our production numbers, and this is going to be a moving target. And I realize that, and it's going to be a moving target until we hit September and October, because that's when we're really going to have the billings, because we always bill in arrears. And so the way our meter readers go out and check it, we're going to have more definitive data in September and October billings. So we'll have to be able to understand that and be flexible. Problem is what the state wants to do, and obviously that's restrict us. So we have to, that's a huge unknown. And so that, I just want, we're all aware of that. But it's important to understand that we don't see a lot of significant revenue growth either in the rates or down below in any of the operating funds and non-operating revenues. Our salaries and benefits, as you can see, are more than what our rate revenues are. And so that's something that we're going to have to address. And if we look at the bottom line for this, and this is the balance of deficiency of funds, you can see that in 17-18, we all know this is a bridge year, and we all know that we had $1 million deficit, and we all know what we did to overcome that deficit. But if you look at 2018 and beyond, we're in the hole each and every year. So we're going to have to do something to address that. That's our funding gap on the water side. We're trying to make sure the water fund is separate from the sewer and funds itself. We can address this gap if people turn their spigots on, because as you were aware, we lost from 12-13 down to last year nearly $700,000 in consumptive revenues. But we're also going to have to look at other ways to manage this.
When
And
I'm
that's what-
talking to people, I round it off to $1 million, you know, it's just.
Yeah. Exactly, because you look out in future years. Now, the thing that's, if we take measures early on, that can help later years. On the sewer side, when we moved around some of the allocations and changed those, it's not as dire as it was on the 8th. We're not talking about $1 million deficit. We're still talking about a deficit. And the bottom line is here is, in 18-19, it's $684,000 projected, and it goes all the way out to just under 1.2 million in the years 22-23. The struggle that we have here is when we look at reductions, remember it's not a proportional reduction. If you take out $1 of cost, it doesn't go 50% of that dollar to water, 50% sewer, because less of our costs are associated with sewer. So that's where staff is going to have to really look at our wants and our needs. And as Dave said, we've already started discussing how can we best align our resources to meet our needs. Breaks in the, how do we best handle the breaks in the field? How to be more proactive? How do we minimize the amount of times we have to redo something? And that's going to be critical as we move forward. The last increase we had in our operating rates was July 2011. That was a plan that was adopted in 2007 for 5 years, annual increases. We need to understand that that's put us in a bit of a hole. Doesn't mean we can't crawl out, but it has affected our ability, plus the ongoing issues with the drought and everything else has affected our ability to collect enough rate revenue. The challenges are in front of us. We're all familiar with it, but the bottom line is we need to look at how we're going to fund the funding gap in both water and sewer from 18-19 and beyond. We only really have two options, revenues and expenses. So what we're proposing to do is after your board adopts this plan and says, okay, this is the picture, staff is going to look at identifying the level of funding that we need to fulfill its mission. There's a certain amount of funding that has to be there to ensure public health and the safety of our employees. So that's what we really need to do, wants and needs. We're going to look at a 5-year plan of if there are cost reductions, how do we implement that over time? Because some of the reductions may not be able to occur in the years 4 and 5. But we're going to look at that strategically over that 5-year plan, cost reduction plan. Then we're going to have to allocate it again between water and sewer, and unfortunately it's not a 50-50 split, but we're going to be looking at that. And we're going to be looking at covering the remaining funding gap with customer outreach, revenue enhancements. Joel has already started, Director Davidson has already started telling people, you can use water, we've got it. You know, the conservation requirements are not there anymore, so, and hopefully this outreach program, that's what I talked about, outreach, will help us, because the more we can get on the consumptive side, the less of a burden we have on the base rate. And finally, we're going to have to look at a rate transition plan. I don't know what that's going to look like because we still have a lot of homework to do, but bottom line is there's going to have to be some adjustments to both rates, water and sewer. So today, I'm asking your board to adopt this water and sewer financial plans and then give us a little bit of direction on how you would like to see us move forward in addressing the funding gaps. The bottom line is to achieve a fiscal sustainability. And yes, we're looking at a 5-year window, but in my mind, it may take longer to really address this. We were talking yesterday about who do we really want to be and how do we really want to function as a district. We've been restricted under certain circumstances, and this is where we are now. But who do we want to be that will be able to still provide a strong, integral infrastructure system, safe, reliable water to our customers, and be able to do it moving forward, utilizing technology, utilizing all the things that we want to be? We're here and we want to be here. How do we get there? It's going to take some time, and this is where we're really starting to delve into it. Water meters. We probably have the most archaic means of reading water meters. Meter reader goes out, opens the lid, reads it, punches it into a meter reader, and then they come back. There's other options out there that basically reduce the amount of times staff has to touch the meters. We talked about rereads, having to go out and pulling staff away from doing work, rereads. There's automatic meter readers systems that allow that. There's even some that allow remote turn on and turn off from here in this building. So we're going to have to work in a way that's smarter to utilize the staff we have. Those are the things we're looking at, but it's not going to come overnight. We have to plan progressively for this. And these are the things that we're really excited about, because it's going to allow us to still provide everything that the customers want and demand of us, but do it with the resources that we have available to us. So at this point, I'm open up for questions and comments on this report.
Is there anything further from the board?
I just have a couple of comments. You talked about, enhancement of our meter reading, for example, and it's been a few years, but we were talking about grant funding for that kind of, getting our systems enhanced. And is that still on the table? Can we still seek all of that grant funding?
It's definitely something we would love to get grant funding for, and it's definitely on our list of things that we're targeting for grants. It'll be a question of whether or not there is a grant vehicle, state or federal, that we can go after to get funds for that.
Because water
But it has
is
assisted
your
others,
magic word,
Yeah. True. The challenge is agencies all across the state are doing, metering
Competing
or
for
retrofitting,
those.
and so it's very competitive. But if there's a pathway for us to get grant funds to do that, we'd absolutely want to do it.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but to follow up on that, we do have an R&R project in this fiscal year's budget to replace the meter system in West Point, Wellesleyville,
Okay.
to update it. And that's our pilot program to see how it works and be able to use it. Our challenges obviously are geographical.
Right.
What's the plan at this point for what kind of a system to put in as far as a meter reading system for that area?
We're developing an RFP right now to send out to the different vendors who provide that, and we're going to, within that RFP, we're going to state what we want in the system. And we may not be able to afford the Cadillac now or what we want, but we want to be able to have whatever we put in place to be able to transition to that. Some areas like West Point, Wellesleyville, we're going to have to use a drive-by system, because geographically you can't have a fixed net. You can have a fixed network, but it's so expensive, it's cost prohibitive. The technology is getting better. In Ebbets Pass, we'd really like to have a fixed network up there, especially in wintertime, so we can do the reads, gives us more flexibility. Copper and Jenny Lynn, it's definitely available for us. And a fixed network means the meter readers don't even have to drive down the street to get the reads. In a drive-by, they just drive down the street. What happens is their program and their computer sends out signals, energizes the meters, they come alive, and they'll transmit data back to the computer within the Jeep, the vehicle, and drive-by, they don't have to touch any of the meters.
Okay, thank you.
So at a minimum, we want to have at least the drive-by, to the ability to do that, so that we don't have to physically have someone touch every meter in the ground. So that would be a big efficiency. But if we could go above and beyond that in other areas where it works, and have the ability, particularly to do the remote shutoff, would be incredible. Because again, that's something where staff has to, and many times after hours, come in and deal with an issue that we have to reallocate our staffing to try to deal with that, to go out into the field and to again, touch the meter if we had the ability to do it here and quickly, and, you know, that, again, I think those are the kind of things that if we can do that, then we can really relieve some of the workload that is impacting the ability to get other things done, like fix brakes. So, you know, any and all options to make that happen, using existing staffing and technology advancements and R&R, all of those things are extremely important for us right now.
Because you don't get a meter read up the hill for 6 months.
You're
We're
right.
shut off in October and don't come back until April. And so that would be great.
And the other thing, that's just one example. Another example is what Joel did when he was in customer service, the payment system. It allows a different tool so people don't keep having, you know, if you have to do something repetitive time and time again for the same thing, something's wrong. You can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So that's where we want to start looking proactively.
And I just have one more comment, Mr. President, and that's the fact that, you know, your story was, you know, what do we do, CCWD, what do we do as an agency, you know, how can we cut costs, how can we become, you know, better at our job? But one of the things that I think is very important that we're doing, and that is having our president and vice president meet with the county. And you're doing that on a monthly basis, right? So that, you know, it's not like we're out here all by ourselves trying to solve all these problems. We're bringing, you know, we're connecting with them to see what they can tell us as far as construction is concerned. Where are we looking for new development? That
Well, I
kind
think
of
that,
thing.
you know, that's got to be the most important discussion that we have, is we have to accept the fact that we need to grow.
Right.
Particularly on the sewer side, to be financially solvent.
Yes.
You know, we can't continue to raise rates on the small amount of people. You know, they'll run us all out of here, you know? And there'll be a whole different group of people that'll come in here and have to have the exact same problem over again. But we need to be pro-growth. We need connections. That's what we need more than anything. You know, we gotta, you know, we were doing the, you know, like the La Cantera sewer plant, one of the big impediments is the high price of sewer service. I mean, I'll bet you if you look at the, you know, any other counties, we have a very low number of commercial connections. You know, multiple connections are something that we should be trying to, you know, encourage. And I realize, you know, our financial model is what it is, and we have to charge, you know, what it says. But I mean, certainly, we need to be looking at, you know, the cost of, you know, there is less water being used, so the connection charges for water capacity fee should be going down. I mean, if our average usage has declined by, you know, 300-400 gallons a day, then we need to be looking at those things to bring the cost down so more people can afford to hook up, you know, and that's just something that, and we need to be working with the county to make them understand, you know, to help them along. And if, hopefully they'll get the general plan done, I think that'll be a boost to us. You know, it'll give us some, you know, it should give us the roadmap of where development's gonna occur, and then we have to start making, you know, plans for that. But I really just think the most important thing that we need to recognize is we need to have more customers. And that may end up being, you know, providing service for other utility districts. You know, because they're going through the same issues. They can't staff up like we have. They don't have the equipment we have. You know, we should be considering, you know, opportunities like that, or be prepared to take those opportunities if a district or even the City of Angels can't. You know, I mean, that's something we should be prepared to, you know, want to at least consider, is operating other people's utility districts.
Sounds like you'd be important working with staff on developing these future plans then.
That's what I'd like to do.
This metering program that's coming up, is that grant funded, Joel?
No, it is not.
It's not grant funded
No.
for that disadvantaged community? Is there any way, was there just no funding, grant funding opportunities for that?
That's
Or-
correct. We did look into it through different mechanisms. Unfortunately, some of the funds that were available to us in the past, the Prop 84 money and all that through the IRWMs, it wasn't available to us for that particular program. And the other part of it is, we need to get going on West Point, Wilseyville. Part of it's being driven by the safety of our employees.
Right.
Yeah, but that is, you know, and again, that's just what the existing requirements under some of the bond measures and the grant solicitations out there now, but we'll continue to, that's one that'll be at the top of the list, any opportunity to access other funds. One of the things we need to look at are other agencies across the state have gained access to those funds. Where are opportunities to do that, and when they do present themselves, that's got to be something we go after, because, you know, this is something, again, we want to do this across the entire district, across the entire county, throughout our service areas, and this is just the beginning of that, so we'll have many more opportunities to do that.
Yes?
Yeah. You said that in West Point, Wellesleyville, that you are going to replace existing meters with this drive-by system?
Utilities did a survey of all the meters out there. Some of the meters, all you have to do is change the register. Other meters that are older, you have to change the entire meter. Sometimes you have to change the meter and the box. So what they've done the survey, the next part of it is to send out an RFP, because we have to do two things. One, we have to select the meter manufacturer. Two, we have to select a software package and the handheld readers that can be used for the rest of the district, as well as the drive-by system. That is still in that process of developing the RFP. Once that's done and we select the vendor, then we can go out and change out according to the existing meter.
Okay, well, follow-up question. In general terms, if I wanted to go to your source of supply and buy a meter that is not capable of being read electronically, what would be the cost of that meter? In lots of 100? Robbie can answer that, or Jesse.
I think we're looking at a regular meter, probably in the neighborhood of $80 to $100.
Okay, adding the electronic reporting out adds another $50 to it?
Not that much.
Okay,
It's under 50, but it all depends upon the type of register and the data that you're going to want to do, and the type of bells and whistles it has.
well, I mean, we need to have an accurate way of determining the monthly use or the bi-monthly use on that meter.
Right.
So what I'm suggesting is that I don't know why we have to go out to really a long projected, convoluted RFP project. I mean, if for an incremental $50 or less than $50 per meter to get this capability, even though you don't have the laptop that's going to read it yet, you can still read that meter manually. You know, it still has a dial on it that you can read as per old techniques. I mean, I'm working on a subdivision in Mississippi, for God's sake, that for 20 years they've had this electronic capability of reading it, but you also can read it on the gauge. So we just, our previous action item here for 38 lots that we have this agreement that we signed, we can't put in old meters for those 38 lots. We need to have, show some initiative and even though you don't have the whole system, get new meters that would be capable for those 38 lots. Why not?
Just to take a step back, different meter manufacturers have different capabilities. Storage of data is one. One particular meter manufacturing register may only be able to store data for 30 days. Some of it may be able to store for 60 days. And some of it has the ability, some of these meters have the ability to reduce the flow down to a public health flow, which means a couple gallons to trickle through to flush toilets and to be able to use medicines. Some of them don't. So what we're trying to do too is this, Director Thomas, is that we're looking at probably overall a $2 to $3 million project and for the entire county to change all our meters out, because it's that substantial. And we really want to make sure we choose the right system, and every meter we put in place is compatible to not only it can drive by and it can be a fixed network. So we want to make sure that we One, it was such a large magnitude of a process, we have to go out to competitive bid because it's part of a larger process here. And we wanted to make sure that we get what we want and it can transition us to the next phase. Because if we go out and say we buy census meters, yet when we end up going with the software package and everything else, that census meter may not be able to hold all the data for as long as we need to do it because we do bi-monthly reads. The data gets to be lost, and that data is just as important as the meter because we're going to be able to match up production numbers with consumption numbers, and then we look at water losses, and that's part of the tool we're going to be
But
using.
also, if we go to the electronic metering, we may switch off to monthly billing. I mean,
That's another option we want to make sure we have that ability to do. So that's why we're looking at our wish list and putting that in the RFP and see who can actually do that.
And just to note, I think if we, knowing that we want to do this on a larger scale than just a very isolated area with a few number of meters, if we did this piecemeal without going out for a larger RFP, I think we would be at risk of, even if we decided, okay, this is the one we want to go with, this is the meter we want to standardize as we move forward and implement any of this across the district. If we didn't do a larger public process with the aggregate amount of money at stake here, we easily could have one of the other competing firms that would come forward and say, you're not following your own procedures on this and allowing others to compete. And then, so I think it's an important part of it as well as what Jeff's talking about. And yeah, it's a little extra work, but the nice thing is we'll be able to bring that back to the board. You'll know exactly what it is that we're making the investment in. We'll have the company, I hope, will be represented. We'll be able to go through that and talk about the features and why we're making that recommendation, and then we'll have confidence and clarity on where we head forward on this.
And one other point about meters and data, it's one thing to use the data to generate a bill. That's part of it. The meter readers, we want to minimize the time they touch it. But it's that data that's critical for us moving forward. It's just not used to create a bill. We have a big lapse between our production numbers and our consumption numbers.
Right.
We can't match them up at all. If we have accurate daily consumption numbers at the meter, plus our daily production numbers, and be able to map that, we can tell where our water losses are. And that's going to be big for us moving forward. It's being progressive in finding leaks so that we can go out there and be proactive in replacing them. Right now, we cannot compare apples to apples. We have a 2-month billing period that we get from a 15th of the month to the 15th of the month. We have no idea right now where that water is consumed, peak valleys and so forth. We only have it on the production meters. We don't have it on the consumptive side. So we want to look just beyond collecting the data, it's using that data, especially with state regulations moving forward, getting tighter and tighter.
And it also, if you add additional elements to it, there are programs that allow customers to have access to the information too, so that they know when there's a problem on their side of the meter and they can take quick action. So a lot of the things we've had to address like this with our policy, like the item we had earlier, let's empower the customers to be able to handle those issues. They can get quick notification and deal with it. And maybe in time we don't even need this policy. But all of that stuff, we will be coming back in the near future as we move forward with the RFP on that.
And time, we don't want to, I've been talking about meters replacement since I've been here, first got here in 2008. So yes, we're getting closer to getting that RFP out and go through that process.
And 8 years is not bad.
Well, it just seems like such a shame that, granted, you may not have all the information that you need, but can I have at least a little confidence that these 38 meters that are going to go in Copperopolis, that they will be purchased from a vendor that would be capable of retrofitting without removing everything? I mean, it seems like such
The retrofit is yes. The newer meters going on, all you have to do is change the register, and that's a lot less expensive.
Okay. Enough said.
Calm down.
You certainly have to be careful. You don't buy something that is a dinosaur right away or won't work with your system, and then you need to buy something else to replace that. That's where you get headline
It's basically
news.
buy an outdated dinosaur.
Exactly.
I'd like to move for adoption of the 2017 Water and Sewer Financial Plan.
we have a motion by Director Rademan.
Second.
Second by Director Underhill.
Is there any public discussion on this?
I'll get to it.
We get-
Is there any further board discussion? Is there any public discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Radaman?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
And President Davidson?
Yes.
Thank you. And we will be coming back to the Finance Committee on August 29th with the initial plan and bringing it back to your board in September.
And,
That's the gap analysis and strategy plan.
and with this, we will also be kicking off a very thorough public outreach effort that Joel and I and Jeff are already starting to work on. We're going to be meeting with community groups and individual stakeholders. And really the idea is we really wanted to use the information that's in this plan to talk about our underlying challenges that we have and use this time for the next several months to do that. So that's going to be a high priority, and we'll be working directly with the Finance Committee and its chair to really stay engaged on what's happening in that regard.
All righty then. Okay, we'll move on to 4C, discussion action, award design for Copper Cove wastewater lift stations.
Could we take a break?
Would you like to, can we take 5 minutes then, if that's what you got? Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break.
So Dave, I've got a question here. We're going to have basically the discussion of the community event.
Good.
Pony River.
I held my back when I was Stockton with it the other day. I had a little issue with my truck and the lights.
Really addressing
When I
some
first hooked that thing up, I think I told you the brakes was bad.
rates.
So I had to buy a different
My understanding was that was going to be,
adapter.
that one event
And
was
then they worked fine. And then, come back into order here for item 4C, discussion action of award of design for Copper Cove wastewater lift stations.
So, good morning. Yeah, this is for the Copper Cove lift stations. This would include, it's going to include lift station 6 as well, but it's defined in our CIP program as lift station 81213 force main bypass project, CIP 15076, and then also this is for award of a design contract, so I combined that project with also another CIP project that's lift stations 15 and 18 renovations. It's also in Copper Cove. So I just wanted to give a little background information about this project and what its goals and objectives are. So there is a sewer line that currently remains under Lake Tolick that we want to eliminate. It's not, it may be under 1,000 feet, but it's something we want to eliminate. Also, in this this project will allow us to bypass some of the sewer flows around this perimeter of the subdivision, and reduce some of the amount of flow going to these some subsequent lift stations 12 and 13 within the Poker Flats subdivision. And that will help our operations crew prevent overflows and spills and give them more time to respond to, hiccups in the operations of the systems.
And for the obviously overflow, spills, any breakage of that line, that's all threatening the source water supply for the entire community of Copper Cove and Copperopolis. So this is particularly important for us.
And then also this will, as far as we have what we call a dry can lift station, which is basically there's a dry pit that has a ladder in it. You climb down in there, and you have electronics down in there, motor controls, motors, plumbing, valves, all those things. So our operators have to go down in there, and then so we wanted to replace those. They've been there since the 70s, so we wanted to replace those. They're towards the end of their life cycle. Wanted to replace those with more of a conventional standard design we use with submersible pumps that eliminate some of those hazards. So this will reduce potential hazards such as confined space, atmospheric, low oxygen level, atmospheric issues, potential for arc flash. And this has been looked at, our safety committee does an annual review of some of our facilities, and this came up as something that we wanted to address. Aqua JPI participates in that effort. And then this is just to remind everyone that this kind of project is what the R&R program is funding, and this is critically important. We wouldn't be able to really, otherwise we'd be having to figure out some other program to address these problems, and that would pull away from our operating funds more than likely. So,
Yeah, this is, it's hard to find a project, other than maybe 3A that has as many compelling public health and safety aspects to it and employee safety as this project. And this is really one that, this is going to be an enormous relief when we get this one done and we get this behind us. I mean, you may have seen the news recently up in Nevada County. There was a reservoir up there that is a water supply for community up there that is used heavily for public recreation, and they had to close the lake because of fecal coliform in the water, and some kids actually got sick. And it just reminds us how important this one is. And again, if we didn't have the R&R, you say our operating funds, we don't have the operating funds to do this project. We would have to take loans. And again, we'd have to, again, how would we pay for those? Because that would be dependent upon funding it through operations. And, again, thank you for making this possible. Thank you to the public for doing this. This is particularly egregious with a sewer line under the lake, and we just can't get this done fast enough. So I really appreciate Charles's attention to this one. It's a very important project.
Dave, I think you make a mention of Lake Wildwood, and have they determined the source of that bacteria infection?
I hadn't heard a source, but I know it is closed, and there were, I believe, 4 kids who were ill because of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sometimes have problems with geese and things like that. In fact, Pardee closed for a while because of the geese a few years back. High population of Canadian geese.
Pardee,
Uh-huh.
it closed, what do you mean?
They would not allow anyone on the beaches to recreate.
You can't have any body contact there anyway.
Yeah, but there was something, I don't know if it was boating or whatever, but they had a big push and they closed certain areas to public access because of the height. And then they went through this process of 4 or 5 different techniques to rid them of the geese. So.
But regardless, that would be a sad story to have bacteria in our drinking source.
that's what we're here trying to prevent. Yeah. So this is a figure I've presented to the board before, and it just kind of, the solid red line up there, and is our existing collection system, conveyance system, where how we get the sewage out of the Poker Flat subdivision over to our main lift station down there off of Connor's main lift station, we call it, that eventually pumps it all the way around to our water plant.
And just curious, has it ever been a common design to run a sewer line through a drinking water pond? I mean,
Well, this is not the first line we fixed out there. There was another project.
No, talk about the design, and when it was designed, was that, obviously it was acceptable, but it can't be common. Is it a shortcut?
Not the way we have it. It's normally they're double lined, it's like a pipe inside a pipe, and, that's an option, but, even those have problems. I mean, I know they've done that kind of thing under, like the Sac River, and they have problems with them leaking, and they have to monitor them, and it's just not.
And when was that designed and installed?
This was in the 70s. It varied because they built the subdivision in units, so over maybe a decade. So I don't have quite the exact dates. But
I would say that's probably more common than we realize, and underneath bridges.
Yeah, all the time.
Infrastructure under bridges that.
Right.
Yeah.
let's just say we will never do a
Continue to see.
project like, or allow a project like this to be included within our system and going forward, at least not while Charles and I are here and the rest of us have had to live with this one.
And so the dots there represent our lift station. So on the lower right is lift station 6. Next in line is lift station 8. Then it goes under that cove there under Lake Tollock submerged line to lift station 12, and that pumps to 13, and that pumps to lift station 40. So they're all in series. So as you move through the subdivision, you're adding more and more flow to each of these lift stations. So the idea is to kind of part that in half and send, part of that flow, about 400 gallons a minute, around the outside perimeter of this subdivision away from the lake, eliminate this line under the lake. And then in that process, so we're accomplishing the objective of eliminating the line under the lake, reducing flows to lift stations 12 and 13, and in that process we're going to also be redoing lift station 6 and lift station 8 to eliminate these dry cans, eliminate that hazard, the hazards associated with those. And like I said, those lift stations are approaching the end of their life cycle anyway, so it's about time to do something with them,
Charles, you use the term lift station 6. Did you mean 16? I see here on the map, it looks like lift station 16 is still in or right at the edge of the water.
Yeah, that's lift station. It's lift station 6. I'm sorry. Maybe
No,
the map we gave you maybe was a black and white. And it wasn't.
I'm sorry. In figure 2, the renovation.
Oh yeah. So that I'll get to that. So let's go ahead and move on to
I
that.
jumped the gun.
So okay. So that's half of the project. The other half of the project is this lift station 15 and 18 renovation. So, and this is on the west shore of Lake Tollock, so this is primarily related to these dry can lift stations 15 and 18, and just the hazard associated with them. It's been a desire of our operations department to address these issues with these lift stations. Our safety committees looked at them, Aqua JPA's looked at them. So everybody's on board with, fixing these. And so I tried to package this project along with the other project so we could, hopefully to cut some administrative costs and, and engineering costs if you group the projects together, construction management, trying to streamline that whole CIP effort a little bit more. So, this is representative of our existing lift stations out there. So lift station 15 being on the far right on Lakeshore Drive, and lift station 18 is on Kiva Drive, about the midpoint of Kiva Drive. And so lift station 15 pumps to, the way it's configured now is it's probably not the best, so we're going to try to reroute some of the sewer flows there. So right now 15 pumps to 16, which is 16, I don't know if anybody knows where that's at, but it's literally right next to the boat ramp down by the lake. So I assumed the more flow we can eliminate going that direction is probably a good thing, just to minimize potential for sewer flows, overflows. And so that preliminarily, we're looking at sending those lift station 15 flows to 18 to just kind of bypass going back down to 16. So, and this is just a typical, some photos of these dry can lift stations. And, I know we've talked about this before, but, our workers have to go down in there pretty much on a weekly basis to, these pumps have a filter on them that has to be cleaned out for the bearings on the pump. So our personnel have to go down in there regularly. And, these are some lift station 18 has like 100 horsepower motors in there, and the electronics are not really what you would do these days. It's kind of grandfathered in old stuff that, we don't really want to have in our system. So, so those are just some photos there of what a typical dry can lift station is. So this project will replace 4 of these. So I think we have some more, but these are the main ones that our operators have, and maintenance folks have said they wanted to address first. So, I mean, I had a little too much coffee last night or something. So what we did is, what I'm trying to present here is that we went out for requests for proposals for engineering and design services. So, and and I have a whole schedule for that. I think the main thing is I just wanted to get out of this is that, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into preparing these RFPs, and we were lucky to get 6 proposals from 6 different firms. So,
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
When we are sending out our RFPs, I know at one time, everybody wanted to submit answer our RFP, because I was going over the list, and 3 of the 6 I've never heard, well, I do know NV5, they're working up by the park, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But Lee and Rowe is our, designated one. I don't think I've ever heard of them, and I didn't ever hear of this Jelson Sanook.
Right,
Newdeck.
KSN for short.
Okay.
It's the wastewater industry is kind of a small industry, as far as the engineering firm goes. We know a lot of folks.
Not from
In-
looking at in Aqua
in
at
the
any of the
industry.
conventions. Everybody's a consultant or a company or something.
And people move from one firm to the other. So a lot of the folks that work at these firms, we know. For instance, KSN, actually Neil Colwell was
Okay. I
he's
know him.
a principal there. He was an acting district engineer here at one time, as a consultant.
Right.
So, and also they have, I think Jim, is it? Anyway, let me see. He was a former employee here. That was a former inspector for us. Where is that? David Carr. So David Carr was a prior employee. So, like I said, a lot of these companies, maybe at a different firm, they used to work for us at a different time,
Okay.
but, it's a very small community, and so.
Okay.
But,
So for, what, $500,000, yeah, okay, 6 bids are,
yeah, and I didn't, we have to review these. So
Right.
last time for each one, we had, I think, 11 proposals, and that was quite an exercise to review all those. And so I was trying to get a few less this time,
How many were sent out? Or how many were invited to the table? You got 6 back, how many?
Well, initially, I think there was Castle also expressed interest. Initially, I'd only requested 3 companies to submit proposals, and then, folks call when word gets out. Folks call, and, next thing you know, you've got 6 proposals. I think there were probably a couple other firms that came to the table expressing interest. So.
well, that's good for the economy,
Yeah. I mean, if someone calls and asks and they realize there's a proposal, I don't try to restrict their ability to submit a proposal. I figure we're a public agency, it's an open process, so, anybody's welcome to submit a proposal on our projects for consideration. On May 25th, issued the request for proposals. We had a pre-proposal job walk on June 21st, a very warm day in June. Proposal deadline was July 14th. And we went through, initially I was hoping we could be at the July 26th meeting. My backup was today's meeting for an award, so. And then we would approximately have a year to complete the design, and then go to bid award for construction in late next year, September, October of 2018. That would give us plenty of time to order. There's going to be a lot of electrical equipment on these projects, so it's going to take some time to get through all the what they call shop drawings, manufacturer's drawings, get those prepared, reviewed, approved, order the equipment, get it into manufacturing, and then they break ground that next spring, so spring of 2019. So this will, and right now this is just the design phase, so we're not committing to construction at this time. We're just committing to move forward with the engineering and design effort. And
Do you anticipate another request for proposal when it does come time for construction, or how will that?
Well, that's a different, that's the bidding process, the public bid for construction. So that'll be a different effort there.
Right, and then will be a request for proposal will be sent out on that as well?
That is a little more, we have a little
Yes,
more.
yes, a request for bids, yes, yeah, it'll be our standard public bidding process for construction, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Sorry
All
for
of
the
our-
confusion.
No, it'll be, that'll be, I think he's, just, the thought of having to prepare all of that right now is probably, after just getting through this part of it, but.
Well, I
yeah,
was
it'll-
just going to emphasize the fact that engineering services are different than a public contract.
Very true,
For
very true.
construction.
Yeah, our requirements on accepting the, lowest responsible bidder for construction is different than what we have within this realm of professional services, and looking at the best overall value to the district. Price is one factor, but not the only. And that's why you see here, it's not, you don't just simply pick the lowest price, and it has to be evaluated thoroughly, and that's why we have a panel of multiple staff who review them and critique them, and try to get our best thinking on this as far as all aspects of the project.
So, and this just is a presentation of what the fees are, proposed fees. It's hard to just make a judgment based on fees, because, each proposal is slightly different. They have, there's optional services, and some of the consultants choose to include those optional services in their fee estimate. Some do not include them. So, you have to kind of weigh things. You thoroughly review the scope, see what's included, what's not included, and as one of the considerations. And I just wanted to also mention on this slide that there's a big difference in one thing we look at is in how many hours do they include in their proposal. I mean, each firm makes some judgment call about how many hours they need to complete the work. So, and there's a big variation in hours. I mean, it ranged from as low as about 1,300 hours all the way up to almost 3,000 hours to design these facilities. So there's a broad range of level of effort. So, and that's, like in V5, they had a very extensive proposal that included a lot of optional services, and that's why, their fee is very high. They were going to do a pretty extensive public outreach effort. So there's a lot of, you have to really take a look at these proposals in detail. You just can't only look at the costs. So in summary, we did have 3 staff members review these proposals, and we had the selection criteria. We looked at the project team, the qualifications, experience, working relationships. All of them pretty much are using A-Team, which is an electrical engineering firm that's done pretty much all of our electrical design for us. So, and being that this has a substantial electrical component, that's important for this project. So these are some of the criteria we looked at. So based on that, Lee and Rowe was the recommended proposal. Everyone that reviewed the proposals had Lee and Rowe in their top, one of their top selections. So at this point, the item is to accept the proposal by Lee and Rowe and authorize the professional services agreement, and the contract amount would be $399,500. And those funds were authorized in the R&R program, so there's no need to reauthorize any additional funds.
Okay. Do we have anybody who wants to make that recommendation?
I'd like to move that we adopt resolution number 2017, what is the number? 49, accepting the proposal and authorizing the general manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Lee and Rowe Incorporated, contract amount for $399,500 for engineering and other design services for said projects.
All right,
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other board discussion?
What other projects has Lee and Rowe done for us?
They did the Copper Cove wastewater plant. the last
So
upgrade.
they're familiar with the,
The area, yeah, and,
Uh-huh.
you know, and then they've worked with A-Team on our projects and other projects too, so.
Where is A-Team from?
Both A-Team and Lee and Rowe work out of the Sacramento area.
Okay. I want to compliment you on item 3, land survey, and item 5, geotechnical, where you wrote in there to use a pre-qualified local consultant. Thank you.
Sure.
You know, I think that's great. I would further encourage you to consider some of the environmental CEQA folks, their offices, you know, that are local, Sonora and whatnot, and the opportunity maybe to go through a pre-qualification with them, to invite them to, you know, to get on this list, so that maybe in the future we could see similar, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we're, at this
That's
point,
great.
we're open, you know, this contract does not commit us to using the environmental folks that were listed in the contract. I mean, that's an optional service. So I can still, at this point, we're open to getting other proposals from local environmental firms. You know, I actually encourage, you know, I'm encouraged, I like that idea, and so, you know, if they're qualified and can deliver the work we need done, then I don't see why any reason we shouldn't try to do that. I like the idea of money coming from our community going back into our community.
Yeah, that's great, Charles. Augustine Land Planning is one out of Sonora that,
Right.
you know, does a good job, so, perfect.
Anything else from the board? Anything from the public on this item? Seeing none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Strange.
You've always started with me.
Don't start with me.
Yes.
Because you always
she's
start at
starting
three.
to her right.
Yes.
Director Adams.
Yes.
Director Thomas.
Yes.
Director Underhill.
Yes.
And President Davis.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. There is no old business. General manager report.
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay, board reports. Director Underhill.
I've been staying up the hill. It's beautiful up there and much cooler. And this weekend, of course, we had this past weekend, we had our big Independence Hall 2-day flea market. It's always the first weekend in August. You want to mark your calendars? And it's pretty quiet. I was just commenting to Charles that TNS, they're working in Cedar Center, and that's going to be, fortunately, the construction's going to go on, and there's not, the activities are, you know, lightening up now. We still have the Saturday night concerts, but TNS is good about covering all of their, you know, work area so that we don't have a lot of commotion or, you know, anyone falling in the holes, thank goodness. But they're working very well, and so we're going to wrap that up soon.
We sure are, and we will be recognize the completion of that project. I think we're targeting October. as Charles has bailed on us. The project will be wrapping up in September, but we're really looking to then come and have a recognition of that completion. It's a big accomplishment. Just also to note, we're also later this week, TNS will be taking out the temporary bridge that we have up there that responding to the storm damage, and the county will then be working to do some clearing out of the creek area, some of the debris, and then ultimately putting their own bridge in there as well.
Okay, but I understand no one's gonna be able to go over the culvert?
Not as soon as that's taken out, I believe Thursday, is when TNS will be taking it out, so we can get out of the way and then let KW Emerson for the county come in and do their work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that works, because the Moose are having their big car show on the 19th of August, and it doesn't look like they'll be able to do it there, so that's too bad.
Director Thomas?
Okay, we talked earlier about the fact that I should have been attending the groundwater recharge meeting down in Stockton this morning, but the group decided that they would not honor my request to move the meeting to the afternoon. So we don't. There's no need to discuss it today, but I think that these meetings will be occurring on the second Wednesday of every month from now on until the foreseeable future. So I won't be able to attend the meetings unless we can make some accommodation here. So just throw that out. I am.
Director Thomas, if I could just note on that, I think I would like to follow up and work directly with our president of the board to bring a recommendation to the board at the next meeting on possible changes to the regular meeting schedule, so that we can make it possible for you to be able to attend and represent our local GSA on that.
Okay. Thank you for that. On the revenues associated with water services and things of that nature, I'm really encouraged to see all the activity done in the Copperopolis area. I can count about 4 septic tank installations that I've observed in the last week or two. And then this subdivision agreement that we came up with today, plus the fact that I'm using a lot more water. So, but I'm encouraged about the revenue side of the equation here moving forward. Maybe if that long-awaited general plan ever gets done, it might cause some more activity. Anyway, that's all I have to report.
Director Radaman?
Just make note, we have a camera meeting here in this room next Wednesday, 2:30. And I will not be able to be in attendance at our September 13th regular board meeting. It's the second Wednesday of next month. I'll be out of town on a little vacation. That's all I got.
Director Strange?
A couple of things. We've got even though we've got a meeting coming up the 23rd, I just wanted to mention that we've got the August 28th public outreach in McCullumee Hill, slated for 6 p.m. to talk about that McCullumee River wildland scenic and potential water use out of the future water demands or needs associated with the McCullumee. So hopefully that will be well attended. I notice the county is being very active in going after illegal cannabis grows, eradicating many of them. I've seen helicopters over in the West Point, Wilseyville area, staging from there. And my understanding is a lot of those sites are ones that are illegally tapping into water or having significant impacts on the environment. So it's good to see them out doing their thing. I'd like to, kind of as a follow-up then see, how quickly we can get that on our policy or agenda, as we talked about today, a policy of our fill tank stations, and maybe better redefining water use on those to really get it to the people that need it rather than those that want to abuse it. I will also not be in attendance at the September 13th board meeting. I'll be up in British Columbia at that time. So I don't know if that means that, you know, if the three of you make it, we'll have a quorum. But anyway, that's on my calendar, that time. And other than that, I really haven't, I need to get more active with some of the local meetings and whatnot, and I'll try to do more of that. So, thank you.
And just one thing, and following up, Terry, I will be at the McQualmie Hill Monday night, 28th meeting as well.
I really don't have anything. Are we going to get a draft of that report, the board, for the McCollum Hill study? Is it?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, this
before
is
the
just, again, the report is not in a form that we can present it. Basically, what the process that we're in right now, the state staff that are tasked with this project at the Natural Resource Agency asked that we and Amador County provide technical information to help them with their report. So we're providing what we're preparing a technical report that just has a lot of the background type information that we're submitting within our study that we're doing. We're going to advance that to the resource agency. Peter's been working on that and hopes to have that out by next week. It's possible that we will have that done in time for that public meeting, and then that could be something we could share with the public. But the actual report itself will be developed after that, and that's something that we will come to the board with. We'll be having a joint meeting with CPUD that we will, because it's a joint study, and then and obviously presenting it for review, consideration, and any input the board wants to have in that. Again, that's showing the demands, our future demands in the areas that potentially served by the McCollum River, and also potential projects to address those needs, and that's the intent, is to advance that information to the Secretary of Natural Resources so they can consider that in the context of whether or not it's suitable for designation under wild and scenic. So,
Okay. All right, I have nothing else to add. So our next board meeting is August 23rd, 9 a.m. Meeting's adjourned.
Just like that. The inquiry that, what's her name, Cicada, the lady,
Cindy?
Cindy, yeah.
I don't think that's,
Hey, how's it going? Good.
I wouldn't think that,